Okay, is this on? Can everybody hear? Oh, it's on now. Okay, I have 8 o'clock, and if my committee, I appreciate my committee being here this morning, and Chairman Lynn Smith lending me her Thursday morning time at 8 o'clock, so I could be gone a little bit yesterday. I was in the peach orchard. Things are blooming, and I'm a happy camper right now. But busy time at the farm for those of us that do that. I'd like to ask Representative David Holston if he'd open us up with a prayer.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, just thank you for this day, Lord. Just thank all the great things you do. Lord, just thank you for this beautiful day. And Lord, if you will, just be with our families as we're away doing the work for the people of this state. And just, like I said, just keep us safe within our travels as we head back home at the end of the week. In your name I pray. Amen.
Okay. Those of you this week that attended our Peanut Commission dinner, I hope you enjoyed it. Those of you who could not, you missed a good time. And if you need a report from the Peanut Commission, it's available in my office. If you'd like some further reading, thank them for being up here. And the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches in the Capitol of the day, I think was people enjoyed it very much. So appreciate the Peanut Commission. Got another little bit of news. Many of you know Will Bentley, Georgia Agribusiness Council. He and his wife Ember had a little girl yesterday, I think. Heidi Charlotte Bentley, 8 pounds 12 ounces. So congratulations to Ember and Will on that. I'm also wearing an ag tie this morning, some blueberries, in honor of my good friend over in the Senate, Chairman Rush Goodman, with some blueberries. So I hope they're passing some good House legislation over there, as we hopefully will here with some Senate legislation that our good friend's been working on all year. I see 3 of them sitting in the audience there right now. Thank y'all for being here. Also, just to remind the committee, today is day 31. So to my good friend from Georgia Tech, who's really good with numbers, how many more days does that give us to pass bills? Well, all right, get your slide rule out, and I think it comes to 9. So we're in crunch time here, a lot going on with committees over in the Senate and the House. And so we'll get right with some business here in our committee. And first up is H.R. 1166 for Representative Stephen Meeks, that bill that we heard last meeting, I think. So Chairman Meeks, give us another little rundown on 1166.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Resolution 1166 creates a study committee to look at warehouse bonding across our state, fruit and vegetable growers, and across our state. We've seen an uptick in the bonds that are called by producers of a warehouse to really recoup some of the what is owed to the growers. When those bonds are called, many times what is owed to the growers won't even touch what the bond is. So it's an issue that we need to take a look at, and just wanted to, Mr. Chairman, really start the conversation. Have had conversations with the Department of Ag, and they've seen that uptick. And of recent, they've had a bond called that was $200,000, $250,000, and more than $1 million was owed to the growers. So obviously they're not going to recoup their input and what they are owed. So really an issue we need to take a look at. It's a complicated one and will take some time, but I just wanted to start the conversation, Mr. Chairman, which is the result of House Resolution 1166, and would appreciate the committee's favorable consideration.
Thank you. It is abolished December 1st of 2024, short-term resolution and study committee. Any questions from the committee? I've got a recommendation of do pass. Have a second. Any other questions? For LC 442751, resolution 1166. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. Next on our agenda, SB 494, Georgia Hemp Farming Act from Senator Sam Watson. Thank you for being here, Senator. Welcome back to the House Ag Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's good to be here. I've got Catherine Russell with the department that's going to join me as well up here, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And we're working off of LC 550279S. So I hope everyone has that committee sub in their possession. And just to be real quick to kind of set this up, as many of you know, I grow vegetables in this state and I raise cattle in this state, and my farm is registered with the state, and my farm is inspected by the state. And when we process cattle, the cattle are inspected when they're dropped off, and the cattle are inspected when they're hanging on the rail, and the beef is inspected at the point of sale that we sell our beef, and we have a license to sell beef in this state. And I say all that to say that a lot of my competition does not have to do any of that, nor do they have that regulatory environment. But if we're going to inspect our food, then we ought to be inspecting things like hemp in our state that can be dangerous. So that's part of the reason this bill is before you, and I'll jump right in it, and we'll run through it real quick. If you'll see in Section 1, we're just clarifying hemp grower licensees, and you'll just see that there. Section 2 is obviously definitions, and you'll see that those run through to Section 3. This is just some federal language that is new to this sub. We're just trying to match what they have in federal code. So that's what that language does in Section 3. Section 4, again, is just updating some language about hemp grower licensee. I think many of you have seen a lot of this language already in the House version of this same bill. Section 5 is a new section that starts the creation of our licenses to process, to sell, to manufacture, to handle. There's some violations in there, and then in Section 6, again, it's just updating language. And then in Section 7, we're talking about processing fees there. There was some changes on the Senate floor, and that part of what this sub does is put it back to what this committee previously saw at that $10,000 fee. Section 8 is again updating some language, and then it talks about our bond. This was another change that happened on the Senate floor that I think this committee may or may not have saw, but it was lowered to 20, and we're putting it back at 50,000 on the bonding requirements. In Section 9, this is a new section that deals with the retail. Section 10 deals with the wholesale. Section 11 is manufacturing, and then Section 12 creates the part about the labs and what the labs will be testing. And then Section 13, again, is clarifying language, and then Section 14 is just authorizing the department to be able to take samples. Section 15 deals with enforcement and the revocation of licenses. And that finishes out with Section 16, allowing the department to make amendments by rules and regs to certain parts of this bill if they determine they need to do so. And that kind of rounds out the bill, Mr. Chairman, and I'd be glad to take any questions if there are any.
Okay, as you said, this committee has seen this bill pretty much in its form. I've got a question that just occurred to me. Back in Section 5, we're talking about permits. Catherine, how many different type permits are we having here? We're having a grower permit, a processing permit, a manufacturer permit, a retail permit?
Yes. So currently, we have growers licenses and processor permits. That's the current code. What we're adding with this bill, just like the language that this committee saw before crossover, we're adding manufacturers, which are people who, or companies, entities that would potentially import distillate or get it from somewhere else. They wouldn't actually be processing the distillate, but they are applying it to some kind of consumable medium. Then we'll have retailers, which are your retail stores, and wholesalers. And then we also require the labs to register with us, so that we have
Yeah.
a comprehensive list of everyone involved in selling hemp product.
I've got one other question. What about products that are imported into Georgia that are not grown here or maybe even processed here? Will they need to be licensed, or that would be a wholesaler, I would assume?
Well, certainly. So we won't be issuing licenses to folks that, let's say, are manufacturing or processing outside of the state.
Yeah.
Instead, where we catch them is once they are imported and they either go to a wholesaler and then on to a retailer. At that point, we're licensing the entities that are here, but we're not really operating out of state. With the exception of the labs, we might be able to, as we flesh out the rules and regs, authorize labs that meet our requirements, which will be pretty stringent. And one of the things that will matter is their availability to be inspected by department staff.
Okay. We've got another question here. Chairman Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for bringing this bill, because I do think we needed some stronger regulations on this. Can someone have more than one license? Could you be a wholesaler and a retailer? They would still have to get each separate one. And again, thank you. This is needed. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank y'all. Thank you, Sam, or Senator. Excuse me. Okay, so on the wholesaler imported products, because that's the majority of them, it looks like, that we have a problem with, I assume they're responsible for testing and guaranteeing the lack of or amount of THC or Delta 8 or whatever it is that's out there.
So we have another bill, I think, on the agenda that's going to come up that speaks specifically to the testing, and that might be better addressed at that time. Or I can just talk if you want.
Okay, I just want to
So-
make, I'm just curious how that is. I guess, and also, now, will the Department of Ag have to stand up a testing facility to check this, or are they going to rely on outside labs? How's that going to work?
Currently, we have we have an arrangement with a third-party lab. There's only one here in the state of Georgia at this time, and we intend to continue with that relationship the way that we have been previously.
Okay, if I can, we'll just go into the question, Mr. Chairman. So I guess looking at the fee schedule that's in here, will that cover the cost of you having to do a third-party contract to do all this analysis of all these different things? Because that analysis is pretty expensive, I would imagine.
It can be. The majority of the cost will be bared by the entities that are trying to make the products available. So we'll only be doing testing to confirm that the lab results that they say are appropriate for their product are actually appropriate. So we will be doing a significant amount of testing, but we are not going to be testing every product that comes out there. We'll be doing checks. Does that make sense?
I understand that. I figured that, but it seems to me like the value of the fees, will it cover those costs?
It should. There are some questions. It should, but we don't know how many. That's part of the problem. We don't know how many people even have a retail license. Like, we'll need a retail license. We don't know how many gas stations are out there, but arguably it could.
Yes, I guess mine is that I'd hope that we're not going to subsidize this with state dollars, that they should be funding their own retail establishments and testing. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions. Representative Stinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Senator. Thank you for your work on this legislation. Two quick questions. If Section 8 is relating to the bond amount was decreased, I'm just trying to get an understanding of why the bond amount was decreased. And then on Section 9, I think it is, no, Section 11, on lines 332, it speaks about that manufacturing license permits issued by the department under this chapter shall not be required to pay the annual licensing fee provided for this subsection. And I was just trying to get an understanding of that, why,
Certainly.
yeah,
Okay.
why the bond amount was decreased in Section 8 and then in Section 11, and starting with lines 332, it speaks about the annual licensing fee for manufacturers, and it speaks of they shall not be required to pay the annual licensing fee. So we're just trying to get an understanding of that.
Certainly. Can I answer those in reverse order, if that's
Yes,
okay?
however you
Because
need to.
The second question's faster. So we essentially set it up so that if you pay for a processing permit, that you do not have to also get a manufacturer's license, because those two are so intricately, like, they're so closely related. And the processor permit's pretty expensive, as is. And so essentially we anticipated, I think originally people really anticipated that the processor fee would apply across the board, but it's pretty high. And we recognized that there is there are entities that are functioning only doing a component of that. And so we said, you know what, we'll break this out and we'll make a separate licensing fee for that. But essentially, it's just taking into consideration that those two parts of creating a hemp product are so closely related. So that's the second. So you kind of, if you get a processor permit, it's kind of a twofer.
How much is the processor permit?
Well,
That's
it
fine.
has been. It has
I know
been.
you said it was expensive. I was just wondering how much.
It has been 25,000.
Okay.
We dropped it down to 10 in the version that you guys saw. Went over to the Senate, and they made a couple of changes, and I believe on the floor it went down to a range of 500 to 2,000. But that was not what the committee there pushed out, and it was, so this sub actually goes back to a more kind of mitigated
Gotcha.
amount that you guys have seen. And similar to that, your question from line 237, the version of this bill that this committee saw did not adjust the bonding requirements. This change was made in the Senate version, where they dropped the 300,000 down to 50,000 in committee, and then on the floor, it was dropped further to 20,000. And then this version is a little bit, again, mitigated and back to 50,000. There
Gotcha.
was some conversation about whether or not surety would even issue a bond at 20,000. So
Understand.
that's just some of the conversation that backstory on this.
We're gonna move on. Chairman Purple.
Thank you, Chairman. Is it not true that with Chairman Meek's bill that we looked at earlier, looking at bonding, a committee to look at studying, that if all of our bonding requirements were to have flexibility in there, like the Senate added to this, that we wouldn't have as much trouble with some of the bonding that we have out there. That this does provide flexibility, allows the department to increase
that's all.
the bonding requirement as needed. And so it doesn't put it at one level that one size fits all. It allows flexibility. And for my Senate friends, thank you for that.
Okay, that's all the questions I see
Do
from the
pass.
committee right this minute. We do have a couple people in the audience that wanted to speak to the bill. Greg Rizaka, is he here? Would you want to come to the podium mic and inform the committee a little bit of any concerns you might have? And I also want to recognize Commissioner Harper here this morning. Thank you for being here. Appreciate your work on these bills and the efforts to tackle these problems we have in our state with these bills. So thank you for wanting to do that. Gentlemen, tell us who you are and what organization.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Dr. Greg Raduca. I'm a board member with the Georgians for Responsible Marijuana Policy. We look at balanced, science-based, compassionate policy regarding hemp and marijuana. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you today. We know that these bills are very well intended, but we feel like they could have serious unintended effects. My background has been substance abuse prevention and treatment for the last 50 years, not to date myself. And so we're very concerned about what these bills don't have in them. And we have handouts, which I've given to Grace yesterday, and we have copies for all the committee members. One thing it doesn't have are weight limits. It's very important not to consider only THC percentage, but the weight of these products. And that would determine how many milligrams of THC are in the products. But more important than that is that they fail to close the Delta-8 loophole, making these products much more available and accessible than they already are by legalizing them without closing the Delta-8 loophole. I think is a serious flaw in the bill. If the Delta-8 loophole could be closed, we'd have much less trouble with the bill because we realize that you want to legalize in order to regulate better. But the problem is the feds have created a tremendous issue without closing this Delta-8 loophole. It's a little complex, but there are 10 kinds of Delta THC. This bill only regulates one of those 10 kinds. And I'm just making up that number for illustrative purposes. Say if there are 10 kinds of THC, this bill only deals with Delta 9. For example, it doesn't deal with Delta 8 or Delta 10. And so the Delta loophole allows the hemp industry to make hemp-derived marijuana products. So we're not talking just about hemp here. We're also talking about marijuana because what the feds created was a loophole where high THC Delta 8 and Delta 10 products can be sold legally. There's no restrictions at all, not even age restrictions. And we feel like making these available through legalizing them will increase accessibility and availability to not only adults but also to youth. So those are some of the major concerns. Also, the bills don't contain any restrictions on advertising. As you all know, these vapes, and it's legalizing vapes, which I don't think Representative Perkle wanted to legalize last year. And Representative Perkle in his bill last year did have weight limits, which made a great deal of sense. But these bills contain no restrictions on advertising to children. We would plead with you to please protect the children. I'm mainly focused on adolescent treatment and prevention, and that would do a great deal to help prevent these products from falling into the hands of children. Also, there's no buffer zones where retail establishments could sell these products within a certain distance from schools. So we would love to see you include the buffer zones as well.
Thank you. Sounds like you've given us some great ideas from new bills next year. So we'll thank you for those comments. Actually, I really appreciate it. I know this committee is very attuned to those concerns and other things. So I appreciate it. We've got one other speaker, Michael Muffer. Is he here? Would you like to come to and speak there as well?
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, committee members. I'm Michael Mumper, also with Georgians for Responsible Marijuana Policy. I'm the executive director. I'll just quickly add 2 points. One is that Dr. Gaylord Lopez, who's the executive director of the Georgia Poison Center, where all poison calls in Georgia flow through, has shared testimony with us that over 250 toddlers have had poison calls related to Delta 8 and other synthetic cannabinoids. So yes, we could put this off for another year, but let's keep in mind that there are children getting poisoned by Delta 8 products that we need to be aware of. Secondly, that 17 states have already banned Delta 8 and synthetic cannabinoids. And I won't read the whole list, but it does include nearby states like Mississippi and other conservative states, West Virginia, North Dakota, and so on. So I want to urge the committee to consider those thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments. Thank you for your organization watching these things and your testimony. Senator Watson, you got any other comments about this bill? You or Catherine there?
Just not much, Mr. Chairman. I'll just say that I know there's several hemp bills that are going to be presented today and coming up that I think will address a lot of the concerns of some of our speakers today moving forward. And, you know, just there again, currently right now, we're not regulating anything and we're not doing anything. And so that's, you know, obviously I have 4 kids back home and 2 of them are teenagers and they're riding the streets of Moultrie and they can purchase this stuff and there's no regulatory environment to help protect them and that's part of the importance of all of these bills combined. But I, you know, just will say this bill here just deals with the licensing and setting up who's handling these products in our state, and there'll be more bills to follow that I think will help pull all this together. So I just appreciate your support.
Thank you. I think you summed it up very, very well there, and I think this committee has been attuned to these bills coming through. We've studied them from the House version and now the Senate version, and I see no other questions from my committee. I would entertain a motion. Perkle, do pass. Second. Any other comments or questions from the committee? Here. Yep.
Note that House Bill 1322, this committee passed, does address some of the issues that were made by the presenters. This committee came out of this committee.
Thank you for that. So we're going to posture all in favor of passage of LC 550279S, SB 494. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate you bringing this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
All right, next on our agenda, we'll continue along those lines. SB 437, Senator Robinson. I think we have that. I know we have that in our folders. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is this your first trip to the House Ag Committee?
No, sir.
Good.
I recognize a lot of my friends on this committee. But, Mr. Chairman, I've got SB 437. I'm reading off LC 550280, S as in Sierra. And this is absolutely what you just said it was. It's another piece to the puzzle. I think the House and the Senate have partnered up really well this year in addressing this issue and trying to eat the proverbial elephant one bite at a time. And I will tell you, it's very counterintuitive that I would be up here talking about this type of product. The absolute hardest vote I've ever had in the General Assembly was voting for the oil several years ago. Because in the well, I said at that time, as soon as we opened the door, as soon as we cracked the door on this plant, marijuana, cannabis sativa, hemp, whatever you want to call it, that there were going to be a flood of people taking advantage of us in attempting to push our state to the legalization of recreational marijuana. And I do continue to believe that is the ultimate goal of some groups. The speakers are correct on some of the things they said, but we've had some very spirited conversations about that we have to do this one step at a time. And as somebody who believes in public safety, I think my responsibility is if this product is on the shelf in stores, then we need to do as much as we can to make sure that it is as safe as possible until we can find a solution to get it out of our state. Right now, we have a lot of product coming in from Wisconsin and other places that we don't know what's in it, what they're doing to it, and whatever, and it's ending up on shelves in convenience stores, packaged in very flashy bags and bottles to not only attract the attention of individuals looking to get high, but also to attract the attention of children and others. And so I think what we do with SB 437 is we start addressing that. And just to point out real quick, hemp is a remediation plant. After Chernobyl, after the meltdown in the Soviet Union, to get all the heavy metals out of the ground and to get all the contaminants out of the ground, they went in and they planted cannabis and hemp because it draws all the heavy metals out, pulls all the contaminants out of the ground. It's a very slow process, and this is the product that we're promoting in our stores around the state of Georgia. This basically sponge of filth, if you will. But SB 437 addresses some of this. If you'll notice on line 67, we have a definition of consumable hemp product as a hemp product intended to be ingested, absorbed, or inhaled by humans or animals. We make an adjustment over on line 78 where we talk about federally defined THC level for hemp means a delta 9 THC concentration of not more than 0.3% on a dry weight basis, or as defined by 7 U.S. Code Section 1639 small 0, whichever is less. And the purpose of that is if the feds who have yet to get off their rear ends and address this product attempt to increase the amount, that we do not have to do that based on what we have here, because again, the feds have not taken any action. They're allowing each state to make those determinations. On 79, it talks about a full panel certificate of analysis means a report produced by a laboratory which is unaffiliated with the processor. To speak to Representative Jasper's concerns, Chairman Jasper's concerns, the labs that we want testing this have to be unaffiliated with the producers. We don't need the partnerships that we've seen in other states that we know are not legitimate tests. It's one hand to the other, and this right here, and we do have unaffiliated labs in Georgia today that the Department of Ag use to do this, and it is somebody who is not paid by any hemp producer in the state of Georgia other than to run tests on their product. Down on 110, measurement of uncertainty means the parameter associated with the result of measurement that characterizes the dispersion of the values that can be relatively attributed to a particular quantity subject to measurement. In other words, we're going to use the standards that are used by the International Organization of Standardization, which all legitimate labs in the United States of America use. If you go over to 124, all of these products would have to have a QR code, meaning a quick response code, so that if the Department of Ag wanted to go into any of these businesses and look at these products to determine if they are following the law, if they have been tested by an independent lab, and if the results of that test are within compliance of the standards that we've established, they can do that. If you move down to section 3, it talks about the purpose of this chapter when determining whether a tested sample of hemp or hemp products exceeds or within. And I think this goes to some of the concerns that the individuals who got up before were talking about, where it gets down into the minute details of what we're requiring the testers to do. Section 4 is where the teeth start coming in. No consumable hemp product shall be sold or otherwise distributed in this state unless the manufacturer has within the last 12 months contracted for a full panel certificate of analysis to be conducted on such product, and such analysis has been conducted and made available to the public. Such full panel certificate of analysis shall be at a minimum, and it lists all the derivatives we're looking for. And what I found odd in this is I got an email the other day that these hemp stores actually like this. And of course, it's competition because they're tired of competing with the convenience stores that are getting this random product in from wherever and putting it on the shelves. And a lot of these legitimate hemp stores want the testing so that they're not competing with this other product that they do not feel is safe to be consumed by the public. If you go down to line 165, you'll see that all of these products must have a sticker approved by Georgia Department of Agriculture, warning potential consumers that such product contains THC, a conspicuous label providing the information from the full panel certificate analysis, and the department shall randomly inspect and test consumable hemp products available for purchase at retail establishments to ensure compliance with this code section. I attended a meeting over at Department of Ag back in, I believe it was late September, and they had gone out on a small adventure, and the amount of products that they had purchased here and around Atlanta and the way they were packaged and the THC content would be shocking to anyone, because basically these stores were selling marijuana in their stores, bottled and packaged, looking for these young kids to come in there and purchase this product, thinking it's one thing, but the store owners in most cases don't even realize what they're selling, because this is a quick turnaround product. They're buying it from out of state, it's coming in, they're putting it on the shelves, and it's flying out the doors. It continues to discuss what's required on the labeling and stickers as you move down the bill. When we get down to Section 5, it talks about the department submitting their amended plan to make sure that we stay in compliance with federal regulations. And when you get over into, let's see, there's one particular section I want to. If you get down onto line 233, we regulate the sale of this product to an individual. They have to be 21 years of age or older to purchase it. In order to protect our retail industry, you do not have to be 21 years old to sell it. So if a convenience store wants to hire an 18-year-old young man or young lady to come in and work in their store, they're still able to do that. They're just not allowed to sell it to anyone under the age of 21. And if you go to 246, any person who violates this code section shall be guilty of a misdemeanor, provided, however, that upon the first conviction of a violation of subsection B of this code section, which goes back to the 21 years of age, such person shall be punished by a fine not to exceed $500, and the court shall, pursuant to paragraph subsection D of code section, allow such person to satisfy such fine through community service. And so we feel, since we're introducing this new punishment, if you will, then we need to make it light to start with until we can get the industry used to exactly what we're going on. If you go down to line 252, we talk about the signage that is required. And then if you go down to 260, we have actually the Department of Agriculture has post-certified law enforcement officers that work for them and manage some of the crimes that occur within the arena of agriculture, and this definitely falls within the purview, I feel, of the Georgia Department of Agriculture, and this allows them to go out, gather these products, make cases against those who may be selling to individuals under the age of 21, and to deal with these individuals according to Georgia law. And one thing that we've also done is any of these products that are found that are not in compliant, they will be seized by the Georgia Department of Agriculture and destroyed as any other illegal evidence would be in any other criminal case. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I know it was a a long explanation of a very short piece of legislation, but it's something I'm a little passionate and some days aggravated about.
Thank you. You're absolutely right. You did a very thorough job of explaining that. I appreciate it, and I know the committee does, and as well as your passion. We got several questions here. Chairman Perkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I got to tell you, I appreciate your frankness, your passion, and your aggravation over this issue. It's something that we must have in place to add guardrails to protect children, protect consumers that use this. And I thank you for the changes that the Senate helped make, and the changes I see in this that tightens up and adds further guardrails. I got to tell you, I did not have Chernobyl on my bingo card in reference to hemp today, but solid move.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Jaspers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Whip, I guess I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Senator Watson, because I don't see any fees in here. Are they in the other bill? Because I guess I don't want to see us, all of us, have to, though we love the commissioner and appreciate the job he does, stand up another 2 or 3 folks to oversee this, and let's let these people pay for it. If they're going to sell them and do whatever, I also want to make sure that within either of these 2 bills, that there are fees that will cross over and fund this, and not that we're having to stand up.
Certainly, and I apologize for not clearly answering the question earlier. So there will be a significant amount of income for the state based on the fees that are paid. And there are, and it's in the other one I don't have in front of me, but there are penalties even for violators. So that's one of the administrative penalties that we look for, in addition to criminal, depending on the actor. But there should be an influx, an increase of monies contributed to the general fund based upon this new system.
Yeah, so not on penalties. I want to make sure that I'm getting it straight on the registration of the products, and the penalties is years down the road. Are we covering this now? Does that make Mr. Whip, I understand?
Okay, Representative Carter.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning. My question is in Section 5, lines 191 through 204. There is new language that it has the department may submit an amended plan, and I think you kind of touched on that. As regulations change, we may need to adapt here in Georgia. And then in 201, you struck out consultation with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and it had shall, but then you changed the may. So I guess my concern is more of the may versus the shall.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and so
I'll, if you don't mind, I'll answer your second question first, and I'll
Okay.
let the agency on the first one. When we give the Department of Ag the ability to enforce this particular portion under Title 16, then they do not need to bring the GBI in. It should not be a requirement. It would be one law enforcement agency inviting another law enforcement agency in to do something that the first law enforcement agency already has the ability to do. But to leave the may there, a couple of weeks ago, and you may be familiar with it, in Pierce County, there were some extremely large marijuana grows down there. It was around $21 million worth of marijuana seized that were being run under the guise of a food producing thing, a business license, if you will. It was operation. It was very public, run by a group of Chinese nationals. And so the Pierce County Sheriff's Office could have handled the case, but because of the resources and manpower involved, they invited the Department of Agriculture in and they invited the GBI and others in. So this right here still allows the Ag Commissioner the opportunity to invite those others in should he need that help, but if not, it is not a requirement that he do that. And on the
Certainly. So when Chapter 23 was originally drafted, there was language included saying that the department could submit a plan to the U.S. Secretary, and we've done that. But if we need to amend it in the future, we would like to have permission in code to do so. So it just basically allows us to stay in step with the feds.
Thank you for that. And that's what I was thinking you were doing. And I guess my thought pattern was if some regulations change, I wanted to make sure that we were in fact going to update versus putting the may, you kind of get flexibility in there. So that's why I was trying to make sure. Thank you.
Representative Willis.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Thank you for bringing this forward. I just want to make a distinction. This is regarding consumable hemp only. Therefore, the bioremediative nature of the plant, as you mentioned prior, and I've spent a lot of time in this space, so I'm pretty familiar with it. That, to my colleague Chairman Perkle's point, it sounds bizarre, but this plant has a multitude of uses. This bill is specific around consumable hemp, which is the largest differentiator between cannabis and hemp, is that one is primarily just human consumption and the other has other uses, rope, textiles, things of that nature, like hemp. Most of the hemp producers, legitimate hemp farmers, hemp producers that I know are seeking greater regulation, are seeking greater guardrails so that they can not only crop shift to a sustainable business in a time of blight for many of them, but that the competition can be regulated, that our consumers can actually be protected. But I just wanted to make that distinction for some of my colleagues that may be newer to the conversation, is that hemp has thousands of uses. They used to make dollar bills and everything else. This is just around consumable hemp with the products that are being shared, and speaking to people in the industry, most of them are seeking guardrails. To my other colleague's point, the fee structure and the penalty structure that is laid out in here, you said the first time is what, $500 until we self-correct or whatever. Does anything go beyond that? Or you said someone 18 can be hired in a store to sell, but anyone caught selling to anyone under the age of 21 is a misdemeanor, correct?
It's a misdemeanor, yes, ma'am. And right now in Georgia, misdemeanor is 12 months and $1,000. And in Georgia, 12 months is not a year. A year is a felony. 12 months is a misdemeanor. And to your point on the hemp thing, you're absolutely right. It's the same plant, and basically to make the determination is how it's grown, the THC, if they're moving the females and the males together. I have a very comfortable pair of hemp socks that I was given in Denver when I went and looked at the industry there. So there are good actors.
Mm-hmm.
The focus of this legislation right here is not to harm the good actors, but it is to prevent the bad actors from coming in and attacking our state with a subprime product.
Correct. And if
Yes,
I may,
ma'am.
just one other thing, it's almost gender specific with the plant. The distinction that you just made is it's complex, but it could be viewed that way.
The female is a very dangerous plant. The female cannabis plant is an extremely dangerous plant because it makes a great determination over THC levels as you move those.
I'm going to
in
use
male
the word
plants.
diverse.
Yeah, well, the male and the female plants, as you move them together, determine the THC levels as during the growth cycle.
I concur.
Yes,
I
ma'am.
just wanted to point out that this bill specifically speaks to levels that are 0.03 or below, which are
Correct.
not psychotropic.
Some studies say yes, and some studies are still
On the low end of what would be
Yes,
considered a
ma'am.
psychotropic or
Yes, ma'am.
psychedelic. Okay,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Representative Martinez.
Thank you, Senator, for your passion on this issue. On line 253, 254, when it says about the signage, how are we going to distribute that? How does that work to let the business know, as far as the signage and posting and all that?
Well, of course, with the department, they regulate all the signage on fuel pumps and everything else associated with these primaries. All the other departments, whether it's DOR, same way we did during COVID, regulating the signage, it'd be the responsibility of the department who's responsible for this to get that information out to the business owner. Yes, sir.
Representative Cox.
Thanks, Mr. Whip. So I believe in the previous bill, the manufacturer's annual fee is $5,000. I think that's what it read. So we have a full panel, a certificate of analysis lab, which I guess is ISO approved, right? That's the standard. So my question would be, it reads in lines 144 and 145. It's kind of where I'd like to hit. No consumable hemp product shall be sold or otherwise distributed in this state unless the manufacturer, who's paying an annual fee of $5,000, has within the last 12 months contracted a full panel certificate. So it's the manufacturer that's hiring the lab, contracting that piece, third party. There may be a place that Chairman that has now left where we could say contracted and paid for, because the question was who's paying for this. And as I read it, I don't think is contracted put us as also responsible as the manufacturer is the one that's paying for this testing annually. And how many manufacturers do we have? And you said only one that's going to be testing?
The only independent lab that we're aware of, that I'm aware of right now, is a singular lab. Yes, sir. That actually, oddly enough, the department uses for some of their stuff, but other businesses use them also.
Will a sticker say ISO approved? Like UL says UL approved or ETL approved?
It will not, because the only products that can be sold in the state have to already be, they have to have the COA, right? And then we have to recognize the lab that they use. And for us to recognize the lab, they have to already have the ISO accreditation. We're probably going to ask if they have DEA certification, their accreditation. We're also going to look for if they are available to be inspected. And so we're tightening there, right? And so, am I answering your question, or am I getting off topic here?
All the labs
Okay.
will be registered with the Department of Agriculture.
Okay.
Georgia Department of Agriculture. Yes,
And then the manufacturer, who could also be a processor that gets to when they've created the consumable product before it goes to a wholesaler to be available for sale, before that product can be moved, it has to have been tested already. And it is illegal or it will be, for a wholesaler to accept and move those, because they won't be approved by the state.
Okay. So the only comment I had was "and paid for" would be some language if that's not clear, but that was just an idea.
I don't know, and for discussion, I don't know of any lab that would test it without being paid. And because they're not affiliated with the manufacturer, then they would, of course, to use their resources, time, and energy, there would have to be some sort of contract agreement between the manufacturer and the lab.
So contract would equal
Right.
agreement and paid for.
They would pay the lab for the testing.
I just for clarity, that's all I was asking.
I think for clarity of conversation, it's a good point. I'm not sure that if we add it in, I don't know that it's necessary that we actually put it in code, because it actually may complicate interpretation later, or we may create a loophole that we don't intend to.
Thank you.
And we want to be able to, other labs that may want to come here and establish themselves in Georgia and get into this business, to be able to get into business and take advantage of this opportunity.
All right. Thank you. Okay, got one more question, Chairman Meeks.
Chairman, thank you. The whip has already pointed out that Pierce County had a situation recently which the Department of Agriculture was involved in, and we certainly need to keep that in mind, as the Department of Ag may be the first line of defense out there, because a lot of these may be being sold as a food processing facility, and lo and behold, it was north of $22 million in marijuana. So thank you for that. And Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time, I move to pass.
Okay, we got, just hold on just a minute. The gentleman in the audience, y'all have already been to the to the mic with comments on the previous bill. Are y'all good? If you could keep it brief, I'd entertain anything specific to this bill. Thank you.
Greg Raduca with Georgians for Responsible Marijuana Policy, and Mr. Whip is one of the best informed, well-educated persons in the legislature on this topic, and I respect that knowledge greatly. One thing that he talked about were the high percentage THC products that are available on the shelves. What Georgia now has, what he was describing, is really de facto recreational marijuana, because these gummies Delta 8, Delta 10 that are on the shelves are not being regulated. They're not being enforced. So a question I would have is, if we're not enforcing the regulations on hemp edibles now, what is the expectation in the future? It's going to take a great deal of funding, because
I think I think I'll answer that. Some of these bills we pass is giving the Agriculture Commissioner the authority to start doing that, and that's the real intent of a lot of these bills is to get authority with him. He's willing to do that, and I'm proud these bills are. If we get them passed and signed by the governor, I think he'll have that ability to start that process.
And that is true for Delta 9, but until we close the Delta loophole the feds have created,
I understand that. Thank you for
the Delta
pointing.
8 and Delta 10 products will continue on the shelves, and so we'll continue to have de facto recreational marijuana, because the CBD in hemp can be used to make Delta 8, Delta 10 synthetically, and that's how you end up with high THC hemp-derived products.
I appreciate you pointing that out, and this committee's aware of that, and we've got a great process up here in this Capitol building, and we'll certainly be tackling that, I'm sure. So
something else is online sales. I hope that might be removed, because that's very difficult to enforce, especially with underage kids getting online.
Online sales are hard to enforce. We've got a bill coming up later in our committee that does talk about that too. So thank you for those comments. Appreciate it. I think we'll move on. We've short on time this morning. Would you like to make one short comment?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Taylor,
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. Taylor Hawkins with Frontline Policy Council. We don't usually get involved in stuff like this, but we admire the work of Whip Robertson in the Senate. We think that this is a very necessary step in the right direction. We do have the pledge of some members of the legislature that we will continue working on this issue, but we also have the knowledge that this is a very necessary step in the right direction, and appreciate the work of the Department of Agriculture Commissioner and his folks to take action to protect consumers in this way. And so we will be back on some other pieces of legislation for sure, but we want to thank this committee for considering, and would ask them to vote do pass on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Talker. Appreciate those comments. All right. I think we're in the posture now. See no more questions. I'd entertain a motion now if it's the will of the committee. Got a motion do pass. Got a second. Any other questions of the author or department? So hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you, committee, very much. Thank you, Senator, for being here. Very good bill. On to House rules. I know it's 9. Some of you might have conflicts, but we've got this room for another 30 minutes or so. If I'd love to. Senator Hatchett is here and has a bill for us to consider this morning, SB 479. Thank you for your patience. And welcome to House Ag and Consumer Affairs Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a bill that's not quite as exciting as the other two that we've heard, or y'all have heard. It doesn't have to do with Delta 8 loopholes, but it does have to do with chemical reactions and clean air. So this is a catalytic converter bill. We passed a bill last year, Senate Bill 60, that dealt with the issue of catalytic converter theft across the state of Georgia. There was no way that sheriffs or police officers could charge someone with possession of used detached catalytic converters. over the past year, we've gotten a lot of feedback from the Sheriff's Association and from police departments across the state saying that this bill has helped decrease the amount of catalytic converter theft across the state. However, there are some pieces of language that needed to be cleaned up in the bill, beginning with the definition, detached catalytic converter, just making it uniform throughout the code section. The second thing has to do with a reporting issue that came up with the language where if a secondary metal recycler buys a catalytic converter from an individual who just comes in to scrap a catalytic converter of their own versus when they buy it from a business, the reporting requirements are different, or they should be different, but the way the code read, there was actually a double reporting requirement for when a metal recycler buys from another metal recycler, and it was almost made it impossible to comply. So we've cleaned that up. And the last piece deals with the registration for a metal recycler. When you go to a county to register, we are saying that $100 of your $200 registration fee will go to the the Georgia Sheriff's Association so that they can maintain the Georgia Sheriff's Association Secondary Metals Recycler Registry. And what that is, if you register in any county in the state of Georgia as a secondary metal recycler, and let's say you get pulled over having catalytic converters and they want to make sure that you legitimately have a right to possess them, the Sheriff's Association maintains this database essentially, and it can help make sure that they're not prosecuting someone that shouldn't be prosecuted or charging someone that shouldn't be charged. But I think it's really is a cleanup bill, and it just makes the code section stronger as it relates to catalytic converter theft in the state of Georgia.
Okay. I assume we've had some issues that the previous bill didn't take care of. This kind of tightens it up, makes some areas that clarification for our law enforcement to go by. Has anybody on the committee got some questions about this bill? Chairman Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Floor Leader, thank you for the bill. And I know we've had extensive conversations over what seemed to be maybe intended consequences that folks who do business in Georgia were unaware of. And having conversation this morning with the different groups, I hope that this will be clearly communicated to those who are legally doing business in our state so that they understand as they're crossing state lines coming into Georgia that they have to be registered in a county which they're doing primary business, and make sure that we cover those who are legally recycling the catalytic converters. It was an issue that came to our attention last year after we passed the bill, but we just want to make sure that that's clearly communicated to those who are legally doing business.
Yeah, thank you for. I know we've worked for the last year trying to address this, and I think the issue there is making sure that if you are from Florida, for example, or Alabama, and you want to transact business in the state of Georgia, you do register in a county, and then the fee, the $100 fee that's going to go directly to the Sheriff's Association to maintain that database of secondary metal recyclers, I think is also going to help so that they make sure they have an updated list of who all's legally allowed to transact business in the state of Georgia.
One further question, Mr. Chairman, if I may. I know that the way that and several folks have sent me messages is you would register in the county in which you're primarily doing business, but are we defining primary? Is it your largest customer? Is it your second largest? Is that important to define that? I don't know the answer to that, but if you're doing business, if you're coming across the state line, you're doing business in two communities, does it matter? And how are we going to define primary if that's important? I'll leave that up to the author of the bill, but just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitman. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll move to pass.
We've got one other speaker on the audience, Brian Hudson. If you come to the podium mic, represent Georgia Recyclers, I believe.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Chairman, I wouldn't have spoken if I knew that Chairman Meeks was going to make a motion. No, thank you very much. Thank you, members of the committee, and obviously thank Floor Leader Hatchett for his leadership on this issue last year and this year as well. Chairman Meeks, we, from the industry standpoint, Georgia Recyclers, we've had some good conversations previously and this morning, and obviously we share your concern as well, and we will, to your point, we will certainly make sure the communication is widespread. And we do work closely with the Sheriff's Association. I know they couldn't be here today, and we'll make sure that we get those communications out, not only from our association, but also through Mr. Norris and the Sheriff's Association as well. So, Mr. Chairman, with that being said, just want to offer our full support for the legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hudson. Appreciate you being here. Those comments. Any other questions from a committee to the author of this bill or to the Recycler Association about it? Seeing none, I think I would take a motion at this time if it's the will of the committee. I got a motion to pass. We got a second. Any other discussion or questions? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Thank you, committee. Very efficient this morning. We do have this committee room for a little more time. We got a hearing only on SB 472. I see Senator Albers just walked in. I think many of us have heard a little bit about the need for this bill, and so I wanted us to get started, get it on our radar agenda. And so thank you for being here, Senator. SB 472.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished members of the committee. The General Assembly over the last many years made it a priority to combat organized retail crime. It is a huge issue in the billions of dollars of lost within our nation now. And through the great wisdom and hard work of the Governor, Lieutenant Governor, Speaker of the House, and the House and the Senate, we have passed some really good legislation called the INFORM Act, and that is making a serious dent in what is called organized retail crime. Most often, organized retail crime is being committed by organized groups of people, including criminal street gangs that make up somewhere between 70 and 90% of every violent crime, in addition to the theft that is being committed throughout our state and our nation. What we have done is for the large folks that are stealing things, whether it be at a CVS or a Home Depot or somewhere else, and then putting those online, is we put parameters in place a couple years ago in order to protect that, to make sure these people had contact information, a real address, etc. And I always use the example that if my wife got me a brand new DeWalt drill for Christmas, and I already had another one, well, you know what? Maybe I decided to put that one up for sale on Facebook Marketplace or on Craigslist or one of those areas. But if I put 125 brand new ones that are shrink wrapped in the box, there's probably a problem there. So when we passed the INFORM Act, it didn't pertain to the individual or my grandma who liked to refinish old pieces of furniture and put them up online as her hobby when she retired. It was specifically going after these organized retail theft rings. The one area, though, that we found a loophole in is it was easy to track these folks when they were paying electronically. However, if you were just meeting someone in a parking lot and paying cash for that, it was still getting through. So what happened is these folks who were committing these acts just started shifting their business model. So this bill is actually pretty short and just closes a very simple loophole, which begins on page 2 of the bill to make sure that we're including those areas so we don't have anybody falling through the cracks. We have some of the greatest retail businesses based right here in Georgia. And I think you're going to get to hear, if you have a moment to hear testimony from Home Depot, one of our cherished companies here, where we've worked together on this along with the Attorney General's office and again the Speaker, the Lieutenant Governor, the Governor's office, et cetera, to combat these folks. So that's the bill in summary. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator. You do have some questions. Chairman Kemp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being here today, Senator Albers. I have a question regarding the contractual aspect of this. I see on line 21, it was changed, the term third-party seller does, it was crossed out. Such terms shall not include, with respect to online purchases, a seller who operates an online marketplace platform, a business entity that has obviously a business, that operates in an ongoing contractual relationship. And I know that was already in code, the lower part, but when you change it, doesn't that mean that anybody who sells just from the platform, no matter what the platform is, they would have to have a contractual relationship basically with anyone who sells, because it would be too late to go back and figure it out and glean it once 200 transactions have taken place on line 13 or 5,000 aggregate sales have taken place on line 14. So wouldn't it be the responsibility? I mean, I know there are people in my community who sell various things online for various reasons. And this doesn't just address new, because it says on line 13, has entered into 200 or more discrete sales or transactions of new or unused consumer products. So anyone who has more than 200 transactions would fall into this. So, but there's no way any platform, Etsy or anybody else, could come back after the fact and say, oh, by the way, you're at 201. Now we've got to get a contract. So everyone who sells anything on Marketplace, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Etsy, they'd have to have a contract, correct? So we would be telling them they would be having to change their platform to some degree.
Well, the platforms already have this built in there for their high volume folks who are doing this, right? So this is over 200 sales. So that was intentional. Again, I use my grandmother as an example. Before she passed, that was her favorite thing to do, right? It was made for the folks that are doing the non-high volume sales. If somebody's doing significant sales online, like they would do in any other area, right? We want to make sure that there's consumer protections in place. You can't have consumer protections if you don't know who it is or where it's from. When we passed the Inform Act, we had showed example after example of people who had addresses of a vacant lot, fake email addresses, fake phone numbers, et cetera. People would exchange payment, nothing would show up, or if it did show up, it ended up being stolen goods. So it could be new or used, right? People could sell what they want to sell. The purpose of this is to protect both the consumer as well as the retailer, to make sure what is being sold is not nefarious.
I guess my question, Mr. Chairman, is it would apply to everyone. I mean, there's no way there's no way a platform can come back. So we have people in my community, for example, that sell daylily bulbs. It's a great little business for this little nursery. I'm just thinking about them. They would, they have people come to their location and pick up these daylily bulbs. I'm sure a lot of cash transactions come into place.
I don't think it's really necessarily going to apply to them then. They can still put their stuff online. They just have to make sure that they're putting the basic information of who they are, their address, their phone number, their contact information, et cetera. The Inform Act didn't seek to punish people for doing business. It was just to protect it, to make sure that they were a real entity, and if then the law enforcement community found out they were doing something nefarious, they knew how to get to those folks. But it's no way going to impede their business at all.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Representative Hagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for bringing the bill. Along with Chairman Camp's concern, I'm concerned about how this would be enforceable. And if we're not putting, let me back up. What type of information would a seller have to put in to, say, Facebook Marketplace in order to sell some used clothes that their children are not wearing anymore, or books that they may no longer need? I know a lot of people, especially in rural areas, use these platforms so that because they need to get out to an audience within their community. I've done it before. Where you narrow it down to people that are specifically within the community, so that you can not have to mail the package. You can just meet up at somewhere in town and hand it to them and take the cash. What type of information would somebody like that have to put in now up front to be able to do a transaction like that?
It's actually, this is already law, right? So this has been in law for a couple of years, and if they do more than 200 different sales, right, which is a pretty significant amount. They're going to put in their name, their address, their phone number, all their contact information to validate that they are actually a real person and not someone trying to swindle somebody, take money. But that already exists today. And if you think about most of those places, like my wife loves Poshmark, right? I think we're buying and selling something there on a daily basis in the Albers household. And it's got all the same basic information. Most companies do this anyway because it's a good business practice. But again, it's the connected dots to make sure not the person who you're talking about, but the person who's doing something illegally and selling it is actually a real person, and we can get back to them.
I guess my concern here is, if I may, Mr. Chairman, one more.
All right, we've got a couple of people in the audience that I think can answer some of your questions, possibly. But I wanted to get to them before, because I think they've come here. Mr. Hudson, have you got or Andrew Fox from one of the great Georgia companies, Home Depot, is here this morning. Would you want to come to the mic and just tell us a little bit about some of Home Depot's concerns? We got a couple more questions, and Representative Hagan, we'll get back to you in just a second. So let's listen to a couple of folks from the audience comment on this.
Absolutely. So thank you, Mr. Chairman and the committee. Like I said, my name is Andrew Fox, and I'm an organized retail crime investigations manager for the Home Depot right here in Atlanta. As a main part of my job, I'm responsible for investigating large-scale organized retail criminal networks across the United States, primarily with a focus on fencing, which is the reselling of stolen merchandise. Since the passage of the INFORM Act in 2022, the Home Depot has invested heavily in open source intelligence tools that have really scaled our ability to search all publicly available marketplace listings for suspicious activities such as large quantities of specifically new or unused products that are being sold at prices that would suggest the goods have most likely been stolen or fraudulently obtained. And what we've seen as a result of that is, unfortunately, there is this loophole in the INFORM Act, specifically around listings that are posted on a platform but facilitated peer-to-peer as opposed to direct payment transactions. So what we've been able to see using our tools is that there's millions of dollars in suspicious listings that are actively being advertised for sale day over day on online marketplaces, specifically right here in the state of Georgia. Additionally, about 90% of those listings are typically done on peer-to-peer sites, not the direct payment sites where you already have to enter in your information. A quick example I can give you from some of the intelligence that we see online, there's one seller, for example, based out of here in Atlanta. They average over 70 listings week over week on one of those peer-to-peer marketplaces. Just the list value of their goods for sale is $58,000. If you equate that to actual retail dollars, that's more like about $85,000. So you can kind of see what some of the discrepancies look like there. So we really just applaud this legislation, the ability to address the loophole, and I'm happy to help answer any questions that I may as well. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for being here. Mr. Cowart, Georgia Retailers, come to the podium mic as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Ben Cowart. I'm Vice President of Government Affairs at Georgia Retailers. Just want to thank Chairman Albers for bringing this important piece of cleanup legislation. And I think it's really important to point out that this is just making sure that all online marketplaces, whether or not they have the ability to process a transaction on the platform or not, are following the same guidelines and regulations. So it's just making sure that they are having to do the same reporting requirements and verification of these high volume sellers. And that's really the kind of intent of this, is the high volume sellers of the new and unused products. Just ask for your favorable consideration. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Representative Hagan, I'll get back with you.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to be clear, I do want us to do everything we can to combat organized retail crime. I certainly do. I'm thinking of small sellers. And I do see that on line 13, we're talking about new or unused consumer products, but how do you define that? A lot of the people that I represent, they buy things and repurpose them and then sell them. They buy antiques, repurpose them, refurbish them, and then sell them on something like Facebook Marketplace. Is that a new product? Anybody? What's considered new and unused?
I'm not sure I could tell you that definitively of what it is. I think what's important, and I hear what you're saying, and I understand it. This is already the law. This already happens today. We've already passed this. It's brought a precipitous drop in organized retail crime. All we're doing is closing the loophole for the same thing we do for a credit card with cash. So I think I understand what you and Representative Camp are concerned about, but this is already the law. It's already happening. We're just making sure that cash equals paying online with a credit card.
Oh, I understand that if the transaction is made through the platform, that it's already law. But this, by changing the word through to utilizing, we're now saying if they post it there, then they're treated like a high volume seller, basically, because they'd have to go ahead and put all that same information in up front, because otherwise how would Facebook Marketplace know whether they were going to potentially sell 200 products ever?
Well, I think Facebook Marketplace tracks every time you put something on there, right? So it's pretty easy in a 12-month period to say that John Albers put 23 things up for sale, or he put up 55,000 things for sale. So their platform does inherently, but I guess from my perspective is, why would anybody be concerned about putting their name, address, email, and phone number out there going to sell something?
Privacy reasons. If somebody wants to sell a few things online, they don't want everybody there to know where their personal address is, because they're not going to sell it or ship it from that address. I think they're concerned about privacy.
It doesn't get published out to the world. It's for the internal systems in case they're doing something nefarious in order to subpoena that information.
Okay, we got a short amount of time. We're about out. I got a couple more questions, and I think Mr. Hudson wants to say something. Representative Cox, I think you been flashing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing this. And I as well obviously would love to see crime taken out in our retail markets. To me, when we're dealing with cash, it just seems overreaching when we need to know that information. Being up in North Georgia, where we have antique stores, we have pawn shops, we have all these different small businesses that they may utilize online marketplace or different methods to keep up with the times. Some of this information, I struggle that information may be overreaching, trying to solve a problem that we don't know that they're guilty of. So I understand there's issues with people selling and stealing. I understand that, and that's been going on since the beginning of time. I just don't know that my concern would be that it's assuming proof that you're innocent beforehand. So I'm struggling with that piece for the people that are innocent, because if it's hitting one person that's innocent, I really struggle with that.
I'm glad you brought that up, because this is exactly what we have done for pawn shops in this state for decades. The exact thing this bill applies to everybody who sells something in a pawn shop. So either sells it to the pawn shop or the pawn shop selling it to an individual. It's the exact same thing.
And antique stores?
Pawn shops are governed different than antique stores are, but if you go to an antique store, you're going to that place. You're going to their physical building, you're meeting with those physical people, et cetera. So that protects people, because they are in fact a retail location. The problem is if you just go online, there is no main street there most of the time.
What about retail produce?
Let's just hear it on. Let's ask some questions. We got to move on a little bit. Thank you. Chairman Perkle, have you got a question?
Mr. Chairman, I will, in the interest of time, I'm going to ask my question offline with the senator, and let us move on. Thank you.
You got anything else you want to wrap up here? Thank you, Senator, for answering these questions and bringing this bill this morning.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Go ahead.
Brian Hudson, I'm here on behalf of Home Depot. A lot of very good questions. So this is currently state law. It's also federal law. And when this passed a few years ago, the intent was to cover every single marketplace. And what we found, I think Mr. Fox from Home Depot said this earlier, was crime has literally shifted from some of the more, the Amazons of the world, for the lack of a better term, to the Facebook marketplaces and OfferUp and Craigslist. And so from our standpoint, this was the original intent, not only in the state law, but also in the federal law that passed and the president signed a year and a half ago. And this, as Chairman Albers mentioned, this is simply closing a loophole. And I'm happy to talk to anybody and will follow up with every single person on this committee to answer some of your questions as well. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much.
Thank you, and thank you, committee, for your patience. These very important bills we had this morning, and I know retail crime is a big issue out there, and so I thank you, Senator, for your concern and attempt to try to put a curb on that. And but I know our committee's got lots of questions, and so that's the process. Thank y'all, and committee will have, I don't know when our next committee meeting will be, probably next Wednesday is our normal time. But thank you. Went well.